And the thing I've always loved about you, because you jumped on board with the youth summit right away. And like anytime we've ever needed you, you get on a flight. It's not easy for you to get to the places that we're asking you to get to. You get on a flight and come and meet us, whether it was DC or we were in New York last week. Like you get on a flight and come. Like you walk the walk. You're not just sitting in Seattle just pontificating. You're actually boots on the ground with us trying to get this stuff fixed.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is because, like, I don't know, like, I looked up to you guys. Like, people that I want to be like when I grow up, Rob Haney, Ryan Brownlee, Jordan Baltimore, Taylor McCullough. Like, and all these guys, and men and women that are part of this coalition that we've built, part of our youth, the ABCA Youth and Travel Baseball Committees, are all people who are, their motivation, I don't think, could be much more pure. Like we're just.
I
trying to
said
make
it in
the
New
game.
York. My goal is that this thing is going when the game is done with all of us and finished with all of us. The game is still thriving and going much stronger than it is right now.
Well, and that's I think the precipice of where we are right now because of things that have happened in the last 10 to 20 years. Like travel and select baseball has to a degree kind of risen above recreational baseball in the youth space as like the preeminent domain. With that comes all this consideration about value prop, about the way that coaches and organizations treat children and what they're trying to serve. With the understanding that the more successful your organization is, the likelihood that you pick up more checks from parents increases. Like that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. And I think you can understand that not as just like as a bad thing, but as a simple thing for parents where my biological imperative is to keep my children safe. And I probably said that 6 years ago, and it's still true today. So if you understand parents need to keep children safe, and if you understand winning as a scenario that's more likely to put your child in danger than losing, then of course parents are going to make choices and spend money in this environment in search of the safest thing. The tricky thing is that, like, well, then what happens when you cut the check, right? And how is your child treated at an individual level once that's the landscape that you're created? So again, you have a 10-year-old that goes 80 plus in their first pitch in March. Understand that as simply a coach who's looking to solve a problem and create a winning opportunity, because the odds that coach has other kids that are as competitive as that one, relatively low. And they are simply trying to find leverage to secure the win, do right by the org, do right by the parents and the kids, but they don't understand like the long-term ramifications of what happens when you make that choice. So our most recent efforts that revolve around the installation and creation of a new standard for universal pitch counts, and then the installation and creation of a system for universal reporting that allows pitch counts that happen in recreational baseball space to travel baseball space to all go to the same place. So now instead of like pitch smart happening in Little League and then not happening in like a select baseball tournament, you put all this information in the same place and you create a system where a kid is like, all their workload is tracked on the mound, and it simply just communicates like red light, green light. Are we in a place where it's safe and healthy for us to throw, or should we still be defined by a rest? And we want that standard to be inclusive of what we understand from biomechanics, which we can get through the Driveline pulse sensor, which is like a wearable sensor that you just have a player wear and it tracks all their throws. And then you create the standard based around those understanding rather than just kind of like throwing a dart at the wall and going, I think a player should be able to throw 25 pitches and not have a day of rest, right? Like, sure, I might think that number is 27. My wife might think that number is 35. What we're going to do is we're actually going to leverage the data that we have on the biomechanics side with Pulse and be able to like quantify that and also observe how that changes over the course of a week, over the course of a month, and over the course of a season. And we're going to simulate millions and millions of permutations of how that workload can look and create a base standard that keeps these kids safer. And then, look, man, the other way that this thing could go is you have another layer on top of that, where if a player is wearing a pulse sensor consistently, well, now your workload is your workload, and you're tracking all the right things, and you can make the decision because the system is going to tell you red light, green light. What are you building towards? What are you set up for, etc.
And
And
you said it, solve a structure. With the red light, green light, you said it. And it was interesting because people don't view it that way, but you and I have talked about that a lot. Unless there's something flashing red next to a kid's name, then it's still going to be the wild, wild west. And this is where you get the parents involved with it too. Because again, you talked about parents wanting to keep their kids safe. If it now flashes red next to my child's name, I'm going to make sure they get off the mound.
Yep. And I've said this in our meetings, but I'll say it again. One of the things that CEO of Driveline Baseball, Mike Rathwell, has said that constantly rattles around in my brain is sunshine. Sunshine is the world's greatest disinfectant. And I think if you think about the current PitchMart standard, I think the current PitchMart standard is probably a good starting place. And I certainly would love to see that standard even being implemented more broadly now. We certainly I think we can develop a better standard, but it's not to say that PitchMart is just bad at the start. The issue is that you think about an environment like Little League, right? Like I coached Little League baseball for 12 years in one form or another. The PitchMart standard was introduced right at the start of when I started coaching. And I kept my kids' workload managed, not just my own kid, but all the kids that I coached under that standard for a long number of years, but I never reported that information upstream to anybody. Right? Unless you go back and look at the game changer record of my teams back in 2016 or whatever, it just exists very much in abstract. That compounds the problem of right hand, left hand, where kids are pitching in rec ball now and they're double dipping in the travel and select ball space. There might be pitching for multiple teams, etc.
Switching jersey numbers to be able to pitch.
Yes, all of these things are happening. And when all that stuff is happening too, it makes the problem even more fractal, because even if everybody ran PitchMart, if it's not reported in a singular place, it's all just kind of out. It doesn't touch each other, and that's the thing that we've been pushing for. And again,
and the universal tracking number, and as we know, almost every other sport has a universal tracking number for athletes, and that keeps their data safe. But then also, I envision it as like the NCAA clearinghouse, where you have to have probably a third party, non-compete third party that houses this information, then disseminates it to everyone.
Yeah, so that's the other thing we're advocating for, is kind of the engine that makes this whole thing work. Is you have a central repository where every player gets just like a unique number. And what we would want to make this thing, broadly work is where you register in Little League and you tie it to that number. And then you registered for a PG or a PBR event, and then it's also tied to that number. And then you go participate in a local showcase provider. It's all tied to that number. So then all of this information, when the data starts flowing in, it's not that the Little League workload is over here and the PG or PBR workload or whatever is over here. It all comes into the same place. And again, I think one of the things that probably doesn't get talked about enough is that some of the rules that have been changed on the recreational baseball side in the last 5 years have made it a little bit more easy for kids to be able to double dip this way. And I understand, I think, the participation reasons why those changes have been made. But if that's a thing that we're acknowledging is happening, and again, from a systems perspective, we made it more likely and possible to happen, then I think we have to do the thing on the back end, which is create a system that allows these kids to stay healthy and safe. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the things that freaks me out the most is there is a single-digit gap on an annual basis between the number of kids that sign up to play baseball and the number of kids that quit. The number, amusingly enough, is 6.9% most recently.
And you've equated that with football too. Football had a CTE, whether it was right or wrong, but it was a bad optics. And you've talked about sending up a trust signal. We have to do something to send a signal to parents that we're trying to at least alleviate this problem. You're never going to get it fixed. People get hurt sometimes. Just it happens.
Yes.
But it shouldn't be what'd you say? 60% of Dr. Andrews' surgeries now are with adolescent kids?
Yeah, so when MLB put out the pitching injury report, which I would strongly suggest anybody get a chance to either read the summary or read the document itself, that came out in December of 24. And on page, let me see how mega brain I could be. I think it's either page 32 or 34 of the report. There's a bar chart that shows the percentage of UCL repair surgeries performed at the Andrews Institute. So this is Dr. James Andrews, pioneer in the field, that were attributed to youth or high school players. And that number is like a steadily upward increase, peaking at around 60%, and now kind of stabilizing around it's like 50 to 55%. Which is 1,000% avoidable if there's structure in place that doesn't allow these kids to be overworked. And the thing that I like when I start to kind of connect the dots here, if we know that we have an injury problem and the statistics bear that out, and that injury is an overuse problem, because that's the thing that like everybody is exposed to because there isn't enough structure to control. If that's going on, and if there's kind of like a perception issue where if you go to Instagram and you search like the travel baseball hashtag, you're going to find this weird undercurrent of parents and coaches talking about how this environment that we've constructed, and I say I'm part of this.
We're all in this together.
We're all part of it.
We're all in this together.
If you know that that's a thing, and there's kind of this undercurrent of acknowledgement that the environment is stressful and the schedule is crazy and it costs too much money and it's potentially injurious, and all of those things are at play, I get freaked out about the future of our game. And what I'll connect this to is when Danny and I were in beautiful Fort Myers, Florida in December. Wonderful scenic Fort Myers, Florida.
Shout out Fort Myers.
Shout out to Fort Myers. We're trying to figure out what to do when we're done with baseball for the day. You know, my kid is 16, almost 17. It's like, all right, let's go to the mall. And we go to the mall and we walk by, it's like a Foot Action or a Foot Locker or something like that. So we walk in and I see a bunch of Jordans just sitting on the shelf. And look, I'm 48 years old, so I'm part of that generation where when the new Jordans came out, like on Saturday mornings, you line up beside the store at 5, 6 in the morning, right? You wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning to try to do the online thing. But that time has passed. So I walk into the store and I see these Jordans sitting on the shelf, and I ask my son, I'm like, you guys just don't really care about Jordans anymore like that, do you? And he's like, yeah, not really. And the point that I'm trying to make, is that like you can't assume that consumer choices are going to be static. You can't assume that people are always going to make the same choice all the time.
We talk about Blockbuster and Netflix all the time.
Right. So if we know that we have these things in the ether, we have an overuse injury issue that's a result of a lack of systems. We have a little bit of a growing perception that the thing that more people are doing, which is travel and select baseball, is stressful and scary and potentially injurious. I can't assume that a parent in 5 to 10 years is going to continue to put their kid in T-ball just because I want them to. Because if the perception changes, why would the consumer choice change? And like, in my neighborhood, I saw the other day, somebody had a sign up and it was like, spring lacrosse signups, registration open now. And underneath it said, America's oldest game. And as a baseball guy, I understand exactly what you're trying to do. I know exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to prop up the idea that signing your kid up for lacrosse is not like an abnormal choice because the game has been around for even longer than baseball, right? And we tell these stories that baseball is, it's America's sport. It's been around us, since the 1700s, et cetera, et cetera. So the lacrosse guys are over there going like, hey, the Inuits played lacrosse in like the 1100s. But they're trying to steal our customers.
Yes.
And if I say that they're trying to steal customers, that assumes that I'm trying to approach this from a commerce perspective. So let me correct myself. They're trying to steal the future of our game.
Yes, fans, coaches, again, that's what we're future fans, future coaches, future people, just people that love baseball. Like I completely agree.
That's what they're trying to attack, and they're trying to do that in an opportunity in a period of time where like we might be a little bit exposed. Like we are exposed. So if that's a thing that concerns me and it's going to elicit like an emotional response from me because I know what baseball did for me. I know how baseball and my experience of it as a player who wasn't that good. And if I was good at any point in time, I wasn't good enough when it actually mattered. I still know how the game has changed the way that I deal with life on a daily basis, right? We talk about baseball being a game of failure, which we understand. What we're actually saying is it's a conduit
Game
of
of
perspective.
learning. It's a game of
It's a
learning.
game of learning. It's a
Learning in
game of learning.
life. It's learning in
It's
life.
it's a it's a conduit of perspective and process. And if I understand that that thing is probably largely there was a reason, I mean that and my grandparents, right? That and my grandparents and my parents. Those three things, baseball and the support system of a family that I was lucky enough to have, is the reason that I am like a successful adult in any way, shape, or form today. I want more kids to play our game because I want them to experience that benefit. And I believe that our game is uniquely positioned to help them understand that. But it requires you to play the game long enough to have that perspective be developed, right? If you go out and play t-ball for 2 years and you bounce out of the sport, man, all that other stuff that we think our game can teach isn't happening. Like, development requires retention. It requires it. But if you don't approach it with retention being the number one metric we're trying to solve for, you're not going to keep kids long enough in our game that they experience all these transformative qualities that you can learn, and those kids are going to go play lacrosse. And maybe lacrosse is a conduit for other things in sport. I mean, sure, I'm not a lacrosse guy. I'm a baseball guy, and I have to stump for our thing. So when I see things in our environment with the ecosystem and the environment that we've created where consumers are starting to make different choices, I think we have to respond to that because unlike football, we don't really have the ability to create like a flag version of our game, right? We can't really create 7-on-7s because ultimately the game revolves around a pitcher-catcher matchup. We need pitching. Like the whole game revolves around it. And when you don't have enough kids who have the skill to do that, the game environment looks bad. So if you think about recreational baseball now, when you've lost a lot of like A-level and B-level talent to select in club ball, if what rec baseball becomes is an environment where it's just like the C and a D level players, and you've also lost the parents and coaches of those A and B level kids, it starts to look really, really bad. And if those kids go out there and nobody can throw a strike, and you've lost all your good coaches, your good board members, and it's not fun, kids are not going to play our game. They're not going to choose it, and their parents aren't going to choose it. And now we're looking at like a future where the game kind of dies from the bottom up. And that really freaks me out. So I think you have to be mindful of these broad things, the gaps in our structure, and try to attack them and solve so that we can keep the game healthy.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know the numbers, but it's 3.5 years is the average lifespan of a baseball player, and 10.7 is when they age out. And like those of us that are living this thing want to see those numbers get better because again, doesn't have to be a lot more, but if we can just continue to improve those numbers every year, you're going to look up and those participation numbers in high school are going to be a lot higher.
Yes, but in the current term, we have 7-year-olds playing tournaments with leadoffs.
Yes. Go back to closing the bases, people. Go back to closing the bases.
I'm pretty convinced that like the reason there is just this simple idea that I've heard other coaches say it. I've probably said it. We got to get them ready. Right? Like we have to get them ready. But if you don't miss the opportunities you have right now to build engagement, build skill at an age-relevant level, you're like literally throwing them in the deep end of the pool and they're bad swimmers and you're like, I got to get them ready. Well, if they're drowning, they're not ready. Like they're not ready. So it's not that the intention is bad. It's just kind of like the application of it. I think misses an opportunity to meet the player where they are right now. Like you can look at kids that are 7, 8, 9, even 10-year-olds and like, man, I wish they all had like a fundamental grasp of leadoff and checking runners and double cuts, etc. We can wish on it till the cows come home. Like hope is a poor development strategy. They're not ready for that. And there's all sorts of other stuff you can get into about like cognitive and physiological development where like the basic decision-making process for a child at that level is like really inadequately developed. So it kind of hampers their ability to even like most of them to do that successfully. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different layers here, but it's just, I understand the intention. I think we're just missing opportunities. We're kind of throwing kids in the deep end of the pool and then hoping that they don't die.
What's your goal here for the next 12 months? What do you feel like we realistically can accomplish here? Because you and I, we're about solutions. So What are some of the
Sure.
immediate solutions we can get done here in the next 12 months?
In the universal pitch counts, universal reporting side, I think the thing that we can get done in the next 12 months is number one, get the new pitch count standard built. So what that means is, is it's just Driveline doing some work where we again use the data that we have on youth, the workload cost of just throwing a ball, because that's the thing that we can quantify. We take that data, we simulate millions of permutations of additional data for the way that like a season would play out, and then we can construct that standard of what we may or may not call Pitch Smart 2.0. I don't know what we're going to call it. Maybe that's just lazy branding. I can't come up with anything more imaginative, but I think we can develop that pitch count standard. This revised pitch count 2.0 standard informed by pulse and biomechanics data. I think that's one thing we can get done in the next 12 months. I think in the next 12 months, we can stand up the bones of a universal reporting app. But the other thing that's going to kind of need to get done with that is the political side of things, which is talking to leagues, talking to event providers, talking to showcase companies, and getting them part of this conversation. And, you and I were part of a conversation at Major League Baseball was a week ago, 2 weeks ago? I don't know. Yeah, a week ago. My life, I've lost complete track. Where the early signal is that I think we are closer to making this a real thing than we ever have been before.
This has felt more real than any other time. It's felt more real.
And kind of like to fully flesh out the story, we started this conversation about universal pitch counts, universal reporting at the ABCA Youth Baseball Summit in was that November of 24. Yep. Is when I kind of like first rolled out the idea
with the Royals.
No, this wasn't. Yeah, well, yeah, Royals were there, but this was the one at Augusta, not at the Royals one. Then we presented that idea to Major League Baseball in March of 25. And then now here we are in March of 26, where more meetings at Major League Baseball, and specifically with people who are going to have to kind of choose to participate. So you're talking about big name showcase tournament and event providers. And I'm not letting the cat out of the bag. I'm not going to divulge any state secrets, but what I will say is, for me, it was pretty bizarre to have this go from being like an idea that I screamed about on Twitter for probably a decade prior to proposing an idea back in Augusta, Georgia, to meeting with Major League Baseball in March of 25, and then going back to Major League Baseball in March of 26, and having us go around the room and it almost be like we should just do this. It felt very, very, very surreal to me, because for as long as I've been screaming about this idea, a lot of the pushback has been like, well, we're just never going to, we're never going to be able to do that. Like, that's never going to be able to happen. And like, for me personally, like there's nothing that makes me happier when you tell me something I cannot do. Please tell me what I can't do. Please tell me what I can't accomplish, because I bet I can prove you wrong. And I'm either going to get this thing done or I'm going to be taking a dirt nap. Like, one of two things are going to happen.
And I'm on the flip side of that, because I've grown up around the game of baseball my whole life. I am like, anything is possible with baseball people. Like, I've seen it my entire life where people have made changes over time, and you get people to come together. So, like, I am of the other side where I'm like, I think anything is possible. If you get everybody in the room together to talk it out and create ideas, and you come to solutions, and you're not always going to agree with things. But I've seen baseball people adjust to so much over time, and I'm like, I think anything is possible for us to get done.
No, I think you're right, but there's just been this weird kind of undercurrent from people that are like, well, youth baseball, like, you can't solve it. But like, this is the W. Edward Deming quote, man. Every system is perfectly designed to get the result that it gets. And we've had youth baseball exist in this space where there wasn't a system, there wasn't a controlling body, and there was no agreement by the people at the top level about what was appropriate for our customers. But if you get these people in the room, these men and women who say what you want about their business interests and where they're trying to drive the thing commercially, even if you had the most like sarcastic opinion about those people, consider that they also know that they need customers, and they need customers to make money. So you can approach this thing from like a, hey, we should keep children safe. You also approach this thing from like, you need customers and you want this customer pool to expand. And no matter which way you kind of get someone, you're still trying to drive them to the same place, which is the systems that we have are inadequate. Better systems can be developed, and all we need to do is get the right men and women in a room to have productive conversations about, hey, how is this going to work? How does this work for my business? How can I operationally execute this thing? And include them in these conversations, right? Like, one of the things that we're going to have to deal with is that some of the providers in the space have access to staff that can make this thing happen easier, right? Like Perfect Game and PBR, typically at their events, they have somebody who's going to run something. So it's very easy to kind of just like logistically and operationally add this as a task to that guy or girl. Little League Baseball, different deal, right? It's a volunteer-driven organization. Nobody's getting paid. But the thing we do have in Little League Baseball is, again, you have invested parents. And if all we need to do is find a way to reconcile, hey, home team scored it this way, visiting team scored it this way, relative to pitch count, relative to who pitched when, these are solvable software problems. This isn't like a blocker. I'm
and
sure
incentivizing the people to do it. Like that's, again, if you incentivize the people to keep track and do it right, again, there's ways to incentivize people to do this.
Yeah. So I don't know, man, after we had lunch after the meeting, and then I got in in a cab to go to the airport, and I'm just kind of like sitting there, and I'm like, are we actually, like, this thing's going to be a thing? And again, I don't want to make light of the fact that there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done.
Ton of work.
That there is a tremendous amount of work. I think there are some substantial questions about who owns it, who's responsible for it, that I don't know that we've kind of like drilled all the way down. But I don't know, man. Sitting in that room and hearing the commitment from organizations that a couple, I was really kind of surprised, but it just, I don't know. I mean, I think it says a lot. And again, you can take kind of like the very, the dark perspective on this and just say, well, these people are agreeing to it just because they're kind of like, they think that this is the political winds of change. They want to be on the right side of history, whatever. Like,
I don't care as long as we get it done.
I don't care.
As long as we get it done.
If this is The Hague, right, and you come in and like you're signing like World War II peace accords just because you're trying to protect your position or because you think it's the right thing to do, I don't care. I certainly recognize that like post World War II peace accords are probably a poor equivalent for pitch rules in Little League. But the point that I'm making is I don't care how or why we get there. But the fact that we're kind of acknowledging that a better system needs to be built, and we are acknowledging that a better system can be built, and we understand how, man, all we need to do is just cross some I's and dot some T's. And I think between 24 to 36 months from now, the landscape of youth baseball is going to look drastically different. And some of that is going to be because of what we're doing on the universal pitch count, universal reporting side. Some of that is going to be because of the way that technology is going to change our game. Some of that is going to be because of the rise of private equity influence in youth baseball. Like, all of these things are going to happen. But to me, the one thing that makes all of them work better is a better fundamental underlying system at the bottom of that stack. And the one thing that we should be able to control for is player health and safety. That means universal pitch counts and, again, universal reporting systems.
Do you envision warm-up and recovery as part of PitchSmart 2.0 too?
I think there needs to be like a strong educational component to all of this. So when people say to me, oh, you just need to educate parents and coaches, like heard, chef. Yeah. I agree.
We've been trying.
Heard. But I think that's one of those things that like I can't control. Like, I think there needs to be speed limits on freeways. I also think that everyone would be better off driving a sedan instead of an SUV because the center of gravity is lower and your handling and braking and acceleration performance is going to be better. One of those things that I can mandate, right? Like one of those things I can mandate. I can mandate a speed limit. I can mandate rules around pitch count and workload moderation. I would educate the crap out of customers about, hey, that SUV, like, it might look tough and you feel good because you're higher than everybody else on the road, but like, you're literally making it more likely that like when you go to slam on the brakes because somebody brake checks you in front of you, there's too much weight that gets you here and your braking performance is bad. You're going to rear end somebody and hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. So when it comes to, warm ups and any type of like education, yeah, man, that needs to be heavy. And I think that there's also some opportunities that you could amplify that signal, right? And like one of the most obvious ones to me is what we're doing with Little League, with the Little League World Series on ESPN. This is something that I was personally involved with promoting along with Tracy Tangway. Several years ago, we tried to get something going with Little League International to have them adopt like a mandatory dynamic warm-up. And I still strongly believe at the bottom of my heart is if like what you see in the first 90 seconds of that broadcast on ESPN is both of those teams on the field together doing something that is holistically health benefit to all of those players, that there is a tremendous signal that's being sent there. Not only about what should be the community environment of Little League Baseball, but also for priority for health. And if you want to have the conversation about how it's going to increase performance as well, like, hey, man, I'm your Huckleberry. Like, I'm super down. Dynamic warm-up is going to help you perform better, and it's going to help you perform more safely, like straight up. But I think that there is a signal opportunity to be sent there when you have, hey, let's get both the teams on the field. We're going to both run a 10-minute dynamic warm-up together. And if you can do that in Little League and baseball, why can't you do that at a PG showcase, right? Why can't you do that all over the place? I think that's one of those things that like I'm probably more likely to be able to educate the benefits of. If you could,
I still live it.
Yeah, I mean,
on here. I still live it.
Yeah, it's the lowest cost, highest benefit thing that I think we could get better at. It's literally free.
It's free.
And
doesn't take long. It's free and doesn't take long.
Because if you're one of those coaches like I was, where like I wanted to get to the field somewhere between an hour to 45 before my game, because I'm kind of using that front part of the warm up is literally just we're doing a little bit of practice, right? I'm layering a little bit of practice before every game that we have. I understand that like in that construction, those 10 minutes of the 10 minutes you might spend on a dynamic warm up that's a high leverage, right? But if you understand that those 10 minutes of a good dynamic are going to help your throwing be better, it's going to help your hitting performance get better, it's going to help your defensive performance get better, which ultimately helps your team get better, then it's the easiest 10 minutes to spend. And we could put out all the educational material in the world about ways that you can do that. And, again, this is one of those things where it's baseball and you, me, and another coach might all have three different opinions about the best dynamic warm-up that we all might prefer. But the thing we are going to agree on is the need for a dynamic warm-up of one capacity or another.
How proud are you skills at scale? I'm proud of you.
The book?
Your book.
Oh, I mean, yeah, man. So I wrote a book called Skills at Scale, Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. It's for anybody that's like a real baseball psychopath. If you know the Ron Polk book of baseball, it's just about the same size. Which I say to say, I poured my absolute guts into that thing, man. And I've tried to give a shortcut to anybody that's going to read it for like all the things that I've learned in. I guess when I published it, I'd probably been coaching for 13 years because it's been out for about 2. I'm just trying to give you a shortcut, man. Like I had to learn a lot of lessons over the course of those 13 years. I went into this thing coaching kids the way that I was coached, which wasn't necessarily the best way because, again, we had learned more information. And I tried to be really open to learning at a period of time. But there was also a period of time where I was like a bad youth baseball coach. And I need to be really upfront and honest about that because the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, just because you start as maybe not the best possible coach you can be doesn't mean that you can't change it. So the information that we try to put together in the book is not only about like the technical stuff, right? About how to do some of the drills that we would advocate for you to drill in order to produce like a really well-moving child. Weirdly, it still makes me feel a little bit weird for my own son to kind of be like the poster child du jour for this thing. But the reality is that like he's the best case study that I have. And And I'm the coach dad, man. I can't, I'm not going to apologize for that. I accept it because that's how I started this thing. You know, like I went to a little league meeting. My daughter was registered for t-ball for that first year, and they were like, "Who wants to coach?" And I had a pulse, so I raised my hand because I used to play a little bit of ball. And now, 15 years later, I look back a lot of the stuff that I did as a young coach, not only in like the way that I taught the skill, but the way that I treated my athletes. And I do have a certain amount of shame about that because I knew that I missed opportunities to meet them where they are and make it fun and make it engaging and communicate better instead of, man, when I started as a youth baseball coach, all the things I talk about like a one carrot on the end of one stick, that was the way that I coached it. I didn't know any better. I had to learn a lot. So, in so much as it matters, the Skills at Scale book is not just like the technical stuff of like how to teach it, but I try to burn a lot of calories about like how do you understand children. I'm a little bit of like an amateur developmental psychologist. If I could split myself in two, I would go get that psychology degree instead of just like needling around on the internet. But to me, all of those calories are burned with like the same intentions. Like I have to understand the player, and I have to understand what they're capable of, because if I'm asking them to do something that they're just generally not capable of, then I'm setting them up for a weird type of failure. Not the type of failure when the game is going to teach you to take ownership of process and take ownership and accountability for like what you can and can't do to affect the outcome. It's square hole round peg. It's square hole round peg. And I see a video of somebody who used to play Major League Baseball on the internet telling me that there's like one way to swing the bat. And then I ask my kid to go do that thing. And because my child is a child and my child isn't a small adult, they fail. And then I'm like, "You're such a failure." And I construct training environments that regurgitate that failure message to them over and over and over, instead of helping them have a training environment where they can construct a set of movements that are designed to solve a problem and they're going to learn. So yeah, man, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I wish I had maybe made the book not so dense because I want to write another one. But I think what I might do is at the end of this journey, whenever Danny's like, done, or
Be a
like,
great story to tell.
yeah, I mean, I think there's some stuff. Because again, like when he hit that grand slam in the first high school game this year, that's his first high school home run ever. Like he hit the one on the building in the summer and then comes out and does this one. It's impossible to not get choked up and emotional about it, because I can go back and look at that video and, bags under my eyes were lighter, beard was a lot more black and a lot less gray. And it's been the greatest privilege to be able to have this experience with both of my kids for this duration of time. And I know that there were some things that I did when I was a young coach and certainly a young parent that, man, I don't know, the difference between him like still wanting to play this game for as long as possible as he does as a 17-year-old, not necessarily a foregone conclusion that we're going to get there when he's 11. Like in the slides that I have in this most recent coaching clinic I have a picture of the first day that I was coaching him in t-ball, and the system that we used for player management when they were hitting on t-ball is we got buckets. And we had these kids sit on the bucket and just wait there until it was their turn to come up and hit. Side note there, please, for the love of God, if you're like a t-ball administrator, just break these kids into cohorts of like 6. Just do that, right? Do that, and probably just don't even have them play 3-up, 3-down baseball. Just have them like practice a skill. But I digress. So on the slide, one of it is like for that first game of coaching t-ball, and the other's from the last game that I coached him, the last practice we had before his Little League Majors All-Star season. That transition is not a foregone conclusion, because again, the average age kids quit this game is right around 10. The average time they spend in the game is around 3-ish years. Getting from 12-year-old majors to a 17-year-old who's talking to colleges about like trying to figure out where he's going to play, also not a foregone conclusion. And on the one hand, it's fine because I don't need my kid to play baseball, and this is a message that I've reiterated to him
That's
over
some
and over.
inexpensive experience to throw out to parents too. Like those of us that have been around it, it's not because the parent willed their child to do it; it's because their child wanted to do it.
This is the intrinsic motivation thing again.
Yes.
But just because you're intrinsically motivated does not mean that you're also bulletproof. Some of the signals and experiences you might have, like my wife reminded me three summers ago. He had a really, really tough summer as I think it was his 15-year-old summer, something like that, 14 or 15.
Hey, is this your next fail forward moment? Because I thought you told me he was going to quit.
He was having a tough summer. I don't think he was ever going to quit, but he definitely. Well, he told my wife. He was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to continue to do this.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to tell the truth about that story, part of that is because of me. That's because of me. So when I'm talking about the fact that I wrote a book a couple years ago as if I'm some sort of highly evolved, I'm completely immune to any of this type of struggle or stress that's involved with being a sport parent. No, I'm still here. And if I'm writing about something, it's just because I probably failed and screwed it up before, so I'm trying to learn from it. Or I also understand what the ideal is, and I'm trying to hold myself accountable to that same ideal as I would anybody else in the equation.
Yeah, but you are a self-actualized human being.
Well, I'm trying.
You are.
I'm trying. Separate conversation about the amount of anxiety that I drag around. Yeah, man, he had a really tough summer, and my wife and I were just talking the other night. She was like, he said to her that he was like, I'm not sure I want to continue to do this, and I think that's the thing where man, at the end of the day, I keep coming back to development requires attention, and when you have these kids who specifically they grow up in these households where their parent is in the sport in some way, shape, or form, and the parent coaches, you have to acknowledge that there's just some weird parental approval, power dynamic, behavior modeling stuff that's involved with all of this stuff. And for years now, I've had these conversations with Danny in the car where I'm like, I don't need you to play. I don't need you to be a baseball player. And you could be an optometrist or a rocket scientist or you could be in business. I don't care. I just want you to do the thing that you feel passionate about. And when I say that to him, he always gives me this dirty look, and he's and silently he's kind of giving me the finger, and it's fine. And I kind of want him to have that response. I kind of want him to have that response. I kind of want him to be like, okay, but I also want him to choose it for his own self. And if there's any way that I can provide safety there, it's by telling him that my love is not contingent upon your participation or performance in this stupid sport. It's not. I love the game deeply and desperately. I have since I was a kid, and by nature or nurture, I met a girl in a bar, we got married and made people, and both of them had that same attachment to the game. At this stage, because I know that the game finishes itself with everybody, right? Everybody is going to be done at some point. All I could want is for him to get to that point and decide when he's done for himself, and ideally not have him stay in the game because he thinks that he needs to make that choice because that's the way that I would give him affection or approval. Exactly. And if I can do that well enough, I hope that I am giving him the freedom to approach competition and the opportunity for either grand success or grand failure and everything in between, and embrace any and all of those potential outcomes and just move into them headlong, almost recklessly. Because I'm pretty convinced that the only way that you can perform at the highest level is to be able to have that type of reckless acknowledgement that I'm okay with the outcomes here. But when you're talking about children, there are cognitive brain development reasons why it inhibits them from having that type of approach to the game. But that doesn't mean we can't help teach it. So the best moments that I ever had coaching, I think, were ones that I did that thing, and the worst ones where I did the opposite.
Are you still lifting heavy?
Of course, Ryan. Despite my doctor's recommendation.
Yeah, man.
People
don't know Devin's still trying to throw up a lot of weight later in life, and
yeah, man. It's
I can agree to disagree on that, but
so I don't know if you can see this. So my ring finger on my left hand doesn't really work all the way right now. My elbow's banged up, and I still went
at your age.
And I still went 295 for a single last night because why not? I put this meme up on my Twitter and my Instagram yesterday. It was like a picture of a guy sitting on a bench, and the message was like waiting for the right part of the song so I can get under the bar and potentially injure myself.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna burn the candle until it's gone.
Love it.
And but what I also need to do is I need to do a better job of being smart about when and how I go like really into deep waters that way. So I'm trying to do a little bit of that thing, but yeah, man. I
I
mean, I
have
was
a
just
hard
talking.
time putting it down, but when I do take a little bit of a break, it's actually better when I get back to it.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm going really heavy, like, once every like week and a half, which is a working cadence. I need to get back up for it. I was in the middle of like a little bit of a push-up competition with the driveline trainer Eric Kozak. Kozak then dusted me. I got hurt, and he continued to take off, and I think he hit like 355 on bench. So I got a ways to go, but you'll find me in like a men's strength powerlifting competition at some point.
Uh,
Once my squat numbers stop being embarrassing.
all right, where can people find you, and what are some final thoughts before I let you go?
Deven Morgan, DevenMorgan. You can find me on Twitter. You can find us and what we do for the Driveline Academy at Driveline Youth. Obviously, you can find us at Driveline at drivelinebaseball.com, support at drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030. Yeah, and man, I don't know. Final thoughts. I guess I'll do two things. Number one, if you're not a member of the ABCA, I just from bottom of my heart, I would really suggest that you really give that a look. The $75 you're going to spend on that membership is not only going to pay for itself because of some of the benefits you get, but you're exposing yourself and surrounding yourself to some of just the best minds in this game. And it doesn't mean you need to agree with every single person, but if you burn a little bit of calorie, I think you can have a tremendously informed perspective on how to do this thing better. And I guess that's just the second thing is that, what we are trying to do at Driveline, both with the kids that we train and with the kids that we have on our teams, is change what their future looks like. And right now, that means that we put out a product when it comes to our teams that's a little bit divergent from like conventional behavior in the space. Because we're not going to play a year-long schedule. I'm going to keep you in a training configuration for a year, but that training configuration is going to include rest and downtime. It's going to include training. It's going to include a lot of practice, and then we're going to go play games when it's appropriate. And that's a little bit, it feels a little bit swimming upstream sometimes compared to like a lot of the other tournaments or organizations do, which is not to say that we're the only ones that are trying to do it the right way. I'm not saying that either, but we are trying to do something highly specific. And at the end of the day, man, I want more people to be able to experience this type of transformation. So whether you go and get like the free youth training PDF that we have, whether you buy the Skills to Scale book, whether you listen to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast, which you should listen after the ABCA podcast, or whether you like come in and train and assess at one of our facilities or join a team, the thing I'm trying to teach your child and I'm trying to teach you is process. Like that's it's process and perspective. The one thing that has been a constant in my life since probably, I don't know, 2016 or 2017, whatever was published, is somewhere between like 4 to 12 times a year, I will watch a video we produced that you can find on YouTube. It's called Casey Weathers' How Good Am I? The Casey Weathers story. And one of the things that Weathers says in that video, which he did as a speech, once he had hung it up, he did a speech to all of our trainees who were in the gym one summer at Driveline. And he goes, hard work gives you honesty. And that's the thing. And I think that this game is a conduit for understanding that concept. And I think that concept is something that can both improve and define the way that you approach the rest of your life. I tacitly acknowledge that all these kids we bring in are not going to go play professional baseball. They're not going to go play college baseball because that's just an impossible outcome. But the thing I'm very confident that we can do is we can use youth baseball as a training ground to train 90-foot baseball players. That would be our specific extension. And if we can get a kid to that level where they can spend 4 years playing high school baseball on a 90-foot field, I'm very confident we can teach these kids a way to approach their lives in a way that is more positive, that is going to carry with them until they're dead. Last night, my wife and I went to a city council meeting because 2 years ago, Wyatt Tonkin, who was a legendary coach in my area, he was the coach of Sherwood baseball for 27 years. Wyatt passed away 2 years ago. My son was the last varsity call-up that Wyatt made before he went in the hospital and ultimately passed away. So we had a proposal put forward to the city council to have our local field renamed after Wyatt. They initially had rejected that proposal. So last night, even after 400 signatures and all this community support, there were a bunch of us that showed up at the city council meeting and we all spoke. And one of the people who came in that I didn't know was a kid that played for Wyatt a decade ago. He drove an hour just to come talk to the city council meeting, and he's kind of explaining like the impact that this man made on his life that carries over into adulthood. I think that is a thing that our game can do. I think the more coaches that we have that have this perspective, the more of those outcomes we can create. And all I'm trying to do with Driveline is kind of take a data-driven and a science-informed perspective on doing the exact same thing that Wyatt Tonkin did. So the good news is that last night they did vote to name that field. It's going to be Wyatt Tonkin Field at Meridian Park. Our community is being emboldened and enriched because we are taking a guy who put 3+ decades into this thing and lifting him up so that someday somebody's going to go to that field or, oh, we're at Tonkin Field. Why is it called Tonkin Field? Google Wyatt Tonkin. Now you know. That is the thing that our game is capable of. We are capable of like creating these kids whose lives are enriched by the game, and then some of them eventually coach, and they do the same thing for the next generation. And like, man, that's all we're trying to do.
Love you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Love you. Love you, brother. Anytime.